Amaka was a young nurse in Ibadan, and her life had never been easy. Every day she woke before sunrise, rushing to the hospital in her simple uniform, spending long hours caring for patients. Her hands were always tired, her back always aching, but she never complained. Each extra shift, each sleepless night, was for one dream, the dream of having her own house. For years she saved every naira, skipping luxuries, refusing new clothes, even walking home sometimes just to keep her transport money. People laughed at her for being too serious, but she kept her eyes on her goal. Finally, after years of sacrifice, the day came. She signed the papers, and the keys of a small but beautiful house were placed in her hand. It wasn't a mansion, but to Amaka, it was heaven. She walked through the empty rooms, touching the walls as if they were alive. She whispered, "This is mine, finally mine." Every brick felt like her blood and sweat had built it. She planted flowers outside, bought curtains with bright colors, and arranged every little corner with love. But while Amaka was glowing with pride, her parents never showed any joy for her. They always compared her to her brother, Chaik, who never worked hard yet was called the star of the family. Whenever Amaka spoke about her house, they brushed it aside. To them, she was just a daughter, and daughters were expected to leave one day. But to Amaka, that house was more than walls. It was proof that her sacrifices had meaning. It was her treasure, her safe place, her dream come alive. Amaka dragged her tired feet along the dusty road that led to her house. She had just finished another long night shift at the hospital. Her eyes were heavy, her body weak, but her heart was light because she was finally going home to the one place that gave her peace, her precious house. She imagined lying on her bed, the smell of the little flowers she planted at the entrance welcoming her, the quiet walls holding her in safety. But as she turned the corner, her smile froze. There were trucks parked outside her gate. Men were carrying furniture inside. A strange woman stood at the door giving instructions. Amaka blinked, thinking maybe she was too tired and seeing wrongly. But no, it was real. Strangers were inside her home. Panic rushed through her chest. She dropped her bag and ran forward. "Excuse me, what are you doing in my house?" she cried, her voice breaking. The woman turned, frowning. "Your house. This house was sold to me. Check the papers." Amaka's heart pounded. "Sold? By who?" "That's impossible." She pushed past the movers and entered. The walls that once carried her laughter now looked like a battlefield. Her curtains were being pulled down, her little kitchen items pushed aside like trash. She felt like someone was tearing her soul apart. The woman handed her a folder. Amaka's hands shook as she opened it. There it was, an agreement of sale. Her parents' signatures sat boldly at the bottom. Not hers. Not once did they even ask her. Her vision blurred with tears. "No, this can't be true," she whispered, sinking to her knees. The buyers stared at her, confused, but she couldn't move. The ground felt like it had opened beneath her. The house she built with sweat, the house she sacrificed her youth for, was stolen from her by the very people she called her own. She stumbled back outside, clutching the papers to her chest. Her neighbors gathered, whispering. Some shook their heads with pity, others too shocked to speak. Amaka's whole world collapsed in that moment. She felt betrayed, abandoned, crushed. The parents who should have protected her had sold her future behind her back. Standing there in the street, her body trembling, she realized this pain was worse than any exhaustion, worse than any hunger she had ever faced. Because wounds of the body heal, but wounds of betrayal cut into the soul. And now she had nowhere to go. Her house, the symbol of her strength, was gone, and the people who took it were the ones who had given her life. Amaka did not sleep that night. She sat on the floor of her friend's small apartment, staring at the sale papers again and again, her tears soaking the ink. She felt anger boiling inside her, mixed with pain so deep it made her chest heavy. By morning, she could not hold it anymore. She needed answers. She needed to look her parents in the eyes and hear why they had done this to her. When she reached their house, her mother was sitting on the veranda, peeling vegetables. Her father read the newspaper. They looked calm, as if nothing had happened. Amaka's voice shook as she spoke. "Papa, Mama, why did you sell my house without telling me? Do you know what you've done to me? Her father lowered the paper slowly, his face expressionless. Her mother sighed, avoiding her eyes. For a moment, Amaka thought they would apologize, maybe even cry with her. But instead, her father's words came cold and sharp. We did it for Chaik. Amaka froze. What? Her mother dropped the vegetables and spoke as if explaining something ordinary. Your brother needs it more. He is the real future of this family. You will marry one day, and your husband will provide for you. What do you need a house for? The words hit Amaka like a knife twisting inside her chest. She staggered back, clutching her heart. So my years of working, saving, suffering meant nothing to you? You just gave everything to Chaik. Her father's voice grew firm. Chaik is a man. A son carries the family name. You're just a daughter. Be grateful we raised you at all. Amaka's lips trembled. She remembered every night she walked home hungry, every time she stayed late at the hospital, all the time she told herself, one day, it will all be worth it. And now the people she trusted most had destroyed it all without shame. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but her parents sat unmoved. Her mother muttered, "Stop crying like a child. You will leave us for another family when you marry. But your brother, he is our pride, our strength." At that moment, Chaik walked in, a smug smile on his face. "So, sister, you finally know. Don't worry, I'll take care of the house better than you ever could." He laughed lightly, as if mocking her pain. Amaka's knees weakened. She wanted to scream, to shake them, to beg them to see her worth. But no words could break their wall of favoritism. She stood there, shattered, staring at the family who chose to crush her dreams for the sake of her brother. Finally, with a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "One day, you will see that you did not just sell a house, you sold your daughter's heart." Then she turned away, her tears blinding her path, knowing the wound they gave her could never be undone. Amaka carried her small bag to her friend Ngozi's apartment, her eyes swollen from crying. Ngozi welcomed her with open arms. But the tiny room was barely enough for one person. The mattress was thin, the fan old and noisy, the kitchen a single stove in the corner. Still, it was the only roof Amaka had left. As she dropped her bag in the corner, she looked around and whispered, "From my own house to this." Her voice broke, and Ngozi pulled her into a hug. That night, Amaka lay on the mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. She was not only grieving a house, she was grieving trust, safety, and family. The people who were supposed to protect her had stolen the fruit of her sweat. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her father's cold face, her mother's careless words, and Chaik's mocking smile. She pressed her pillow against her face to muffle her sobs, but the pain inside her chest refused to quiet. Meanwhile, Chaik was busy parading around town. At the bar, he bragged loudly to his friends. "That house was always mine. My parents knew I deserved it. My sister, she doesn't need such things, she'll marry and move away." He walked through the neighborhood like a king, smiling as if he had earned something great. People whispered behind his back, but to his face, they nodded, afraid of his arrogance. Neighbors who knew the truth shook their heads with pity when they saw Amaka. Some came to her quietly and said, "We are sorry for what your family did. You deserved better." But those words, though kind, could not heal her wound. Every night, she still cried herself to sleep. At the hospital, she tried to hide her pain behind a smile. She gave medicine, cleaned wounds, and comforted patients, but inside she felt empty. Sometimes, when she saw an old woman being visited by her loving children, her heart broke again. She wondered why her own parents could not see her worth. Back at Ngozi's place, nights were the hardest. She would sit by the small window, looking at the moon, whispering to herself, "Why me? What did I do wrong? Why does my blood treat me like a stranger?" The silence of the night only made her loneliness louder. Chaik, on the other hand, threw a small party in the house, inviting his friends. Music blasted. Laughter echoed through the walls Amaka once decorated with love. Someone told her about it, and she felt her chest tighten until she could barely breathe. She imagined strangers walking on her floors, drinking in her living room, sitting on the porch where she once planted flowers. The thought tore her apart. Amaka's sleepless nights piled one after another, her spirit growing weaker. But deep inside, a tiny voice whispered that the story was not over. Something somehow would change. Days turned into weeks, and Amaka's pain only grew heavier. One Saturday afternoon, she decided to visit her late grandfather's old room in her parents' compound. Nobody really touched his belongings since he passed, and the dusty shelves still carried his books, journals, and little treasures. Amaka had always been close to him. He was the only one who truly believed in her. She remembered his warm smile, his gentle words, and how he used to pat her shoulder saying, "You are stronger than you know, my child." She sat on the wooden floor, pulling out the old books one by one. The covers were worn, the pages yellowed, but they carried the smell of his presence. As she carefully dusted them, something unusual caught her eye, an envelope tucked deep inside a large Bible. Her heart skipped. She pulled it out and froze. On the front, in his familiar handwriting, were the words, "To my dearest granddaughter, Amaka." Her hands trembled as she held it close. For a long moment, she couldn't even open it. She just pressed it against her chest, tears streaming down her face. Finally, with shaking fingers, she tore the seal. Inside was a neatly folded letter, the ink slightly faded but still clear. She began to read aloud, her voice breaking. "My precious Amaka, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. I want you to know that you were always the light of my heart. You worked hard, you carried yourself with dignity, and I am proud of you. The house you live in is not a gift from your parents. It is your inheritance from me. I registered it in your name to secure your future. No one has the right to take it from you. This house belongs to you forever." Amaka's tears fell onto the paper, smudging the words, but she read every line again and again. She felt her grandfather's love reach across time, protecting her even after his death. For the first time since the betrayal, she felt strength stirring inside her chest. She wasn't just fighting for a house. She was fighting for the promise her grandfather had given her, the legacy of his love. She clutched the letter tightly, whispering, "Thank you, Papa. Thank you for not forgetting me." The pain in her chest began to shift, slowly turning into determination. She realized her parents' betrayal was not the final chapter. She had proof. She had truth. As she carefully placed the letter back in its envelope, her eyes burned with new fire. For nights she had cried herself to sleep, feeling powerless. But now she knew destiny was on her side. The house was never theirs to sell. It was hers by right, and soon, very soon, the world would know the truth. A week later, Amaka traveled to Lagos for the official will reading. Her stomach twisted with nerves as she stepped into the lawyer's tall office building. The air inside smelled of polished wood and seriousness. She held her small handbag tightly against her chest, the envelope with her grandfather's letter hidden safely inside. That letter was her secret strength, but today, the truth would no longer remain a secret. Inside the conference room, the whole extended family was already gathered. A long polished table sat in the middle, and the lawyer, a stern-looking man in glasses, sat at the head with a thick file of documents. Uncles, aunties, and cousins whispered among themselves, their eyes filled with curiosity. Everyone wanted to know how the late patriarch's wealth would be shared. Amaka's parents walked in proudly, her mother adjusting her headscarf, her father nodding at relatives as if victory was already theirs. Chaik followed, dressed in a sharp suit, his smile wide with confidence. He shook hands, cracked jokes, and even patted Amaka on the shoulder. "Don't worry, sister," he said mockingly. "I'll take care of you when the properties are read. You know everything comes to me anyway." Amaka said nothing. She sat quietly at the far end of the table, her fingers brushing over the envelope in her bag. She looked calm on the outside, but inside her heart was beating like a drum. The lawyer cleared his throat, and the room fell silent. "We are gathered here to read the last will and testament of Chief Obinna Okafor." His voice was steady, and each word carried weight. He began listing smaller properties, farmland, some savings, shares in a business. Relatives leaned forward, murmuring when their names were mentioned. Excitement buzzed in the air. Then the lawyer paused, adjusting his glasses. Now about the house in Ibadan, all eyes turned to him. Chaik leaned back in his chair, smiling like a man certain of victory. Amaka's parents held hands under the table, already imagining their son's name written in bold. But the lawyer's next words cracked through the silence like thunder. This property was registered in the name of Amaka Okafor years before Chief Obina's passing. According to his instructions, it is her inheritance alone. No one has the right to sell or claim it. The documents of ownership are clear and legally binding. Gasps filled the room. Some relatives covered their mouths in shock, others exchanged knowing glances. Amaka's parents froze, their faces draining of color. Chaik's smile vanished, replaced by confusion and anger. Amaka's chest rose and fell quickly as relief washed over her. She wanted to cry, but she held her head high. Her grandfather's love had spoken for her, even from the grave. She silently touched her bag where the letter rested, her proof, her shield, her destiny. The lawyer's voice echoed through the quiet room. This Ibadan property was registered in the name of Miss Amaka Okafor years ago, under the instruction of her grandfather, Chief Obina Okafor. It is her inheritance and hers alone. Any attempt to sell it without her consent is unlawful. For a moment, silence swallowed the room. Then came a wave of gasps and whispers. Aunties leaned closer to each other. Uncles shook their heads in disbelief, and cousins' eyes widened. The air was thick with shock. Amaka sat frozen, her heart pounding so loud she thought everyone could hear it. She saw the lawyer hold up the official documents, her name clearly printed on them. Proof. Real undeniable proof. Her throat tightened as tears threatened to spill. All those sleepless nights, all those cries into her pillow, suddenly they felt lighter. Her parents' faces told another story. Her mother's lips parted, but no words came out. Her father's hands trembled slightly, the confidence he wore like a crown now gone. Chaik, who had been leaning back with a smug grin moments ago, shot up from his seat. "This is a mistake," he shouted, slamming his palm on the table. "That house was sold to me. Everyone knows I am the heir. This can't be true." The lawyer looked at him calmly. "There is no mistake. Your grandfather was very clear. The house belongs to Amaka. The sale was invalid because the sellers had no right. What your parents did was fraudulent." Gasps again. An aunt shook her head, whispering, "Fraud their own daughter?" Chaik's face turned red. He pointed at Amaka. "She tricked him. She must have forced him when he was weak. My sister doesn't deserve that house." Amaka's chest burned. For the first time she stood up and spoke, her voice trembling but strong. "Don't you dare insult me, Chaik. I worked for that house. I sacrificed everything for it. And Papa gave it to me because he saw my worth, even when all of you refused to see it." Her mother finally spoke, her voice shaking. "But you are a daughter, Amaka. How can a daughter inherit while a son is left out?" The lawyer cut in firmly. "Chief Obina chose based on love and wisdom, not tradition. The law recognizes Amaka as the rightful owner. That is final." The room fell into uneasy silence. Relatives shifted uncomfortably, some nodding in agreement, others avoiding eye contact with Amaka's parents. A few even whispered, "Chief knew what he was doing. She earned it." Amaka sat back down, her hands gripping the letter in her bag. She wanted to weep with relief, but she kept her head high. For the first time she felt seen, not as just a daughter, but as a person with worth, with rights, with destiny. The room exploded with voices after the lawyer's words. Relatives leaned across the table, some clapping their hands in approval, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The tension was thick, like fire about to spread. One uncle leaned back in his chair and said loudly, "Chief was wise. He saw the strength in Amaka. She deserved that house." A few nodded in agreement. An aunt added softly, "Yes, she worked harder than anyone. He simply rewarded her sacrifice." But not everyone agreed. Another cousin muttered, "Giving a house to a daughter instead of the son? It will bring shame. What kind of tradition is this?" Soon whispers turned into arguments, and the family split into two sides, those who supported Amaka and those who believed Chaik should have been the rightful heir. Chaik could not hold himself anymore. He slammed his fist on the table so hard the glasses rattled. This is unfair. I am the son, the heir, the pride of this family. That house should be mine. His voice shook with rage as he pointed at Amaka, his eyes blazing. She doesn't deserve it. She has always been second place. The lawyer didn't flinch. He raised his hand and said firmly, "Enough. The law is not a game of favoritism. The documents are clear. The property was never yours, and your parents committed fraud by trying to sell it. Only Amaka is recognized as the legal owner." The word fraud dropped like a hammer. Gasps filled the room again. Some relatives looked away, ashamed. Others whispered, "How could they betray their own daughter like that?" Amaka's mother covered her face with her scarf, embarrassed. Her father's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his pride crushed. Chaik, however, refused to back down. He stood and shouted, "If my father were alive, he would never do this. She must have tricked him." But another uncle snapped back, "Watch your tongue, boy." Chief loved Amaka. He saw her struggle and wanted to protect her future. Don't insult his memory with your selfishness. The argument grew louder. Some relatives praised Amaka, calling her brave and hardworking. Others mumbled about broken traditions. But through it all, Amaka sat quietly, her hands resting on her bag, holding the letter that carried her grandfather's love. Her heart still ached from the betrayal, but for the first time she felt defended, not alone. Finally, the lawyer struck the table with his palm, silencing everyone. "This meeting is not about opinion. It is about the law. The law recognizes only Amaka. The case is closed. Any further attempt to challenge this will be treated as a crime." The room fell silent. Chaik stood there, his chest heaving, but no words came. Amaka's parents avoided her eyes. Their pride shattered in front of everyone. And in that silence, Amaka felt a strange power rise inside her. The truth had spoken, and no one, not even her own blood, could erase it. When the lawyer finally handed Amaka the official documents, she held them in her trembling hands like a crown of victory. Her eyes burned with tears, but this time they were not tears of pain. They were tears of relief. The house was hers again. Her grandfather's promise had been honored, and justice had spoken louder than betrayal. When she returned to Ibadan with the papers, the whole neighborhood gathered. People had heard the story, how her own parents had sold the house behind her back, and how the truth had been revealed. Children ran ahead shouting, "Amaka is back! The house is hers!" Neighbors clapped for her as she walked through the gate. Some hugged her, others raised their hands in respect. One old woman said proudly, "This is the girl who fought blood with truth." Amaka smiled through her tears. For weeks she had walked with her head down, carrying shame and pain. Now she walked tall. The walls of her house, once filled with sorrow, seemed to welcome her home again. But this time she wasn't just returning, she was rising. The first thing she did was clean the house from top to bottom. Every room, every corner, every flower bed. She repainted the walls, repaired broken furniture, and planted even more flowers by the gate. But as she worked, a new dream grew inside her heart. She knew this house wasn't just for her. It was meant to heal others the way it had healed her. So she made a bold decision. She turned part of her home into a free clinic for the poor. She cleared 2 rooms, bought medical supplies with her savings, and invited people from the neighborhood to come for treatment. Soon, patients began to arrive, children with fevers, women needing checkups, old men with wounds. Amaka treated them all with gentle hands and a warm smile. Word spread quickly. People came from nearby streets and villages, calling her house a place of healing. Mothers blessed her, fathers prayed for her, children laughed in her compound. The same house that had once been stolen became a house of hope. Each night, Amaka sat by the window, listening to the voices outside, her heart full. She thought of her grandfather and whispered, "Papa, you were right. This house was not just for me. It was for everyone." The same neighbors who once pitied her now celebrated her strength. They no longer saw her as the daughter rejected by her family, but as the woman who stood up for herself and turned her pain into purpose. Her story became a lesson in the town, that truth cannot be buried, and destiny cannot be stolen. Amaka knew her scars would always remain, but they no longer defined her. She had risen from betrayal, stronger than ever, carrying not only her own dreams but the dreams of all who walked through her doors. The day of the clinic's opening arrived, and Amaka stood at the front gate of her house, now painted bright and full of life. Balloons and ribbons decorated the entrance, and a crowd had gathered, neighbors, patients, church members, and even journalists who had heard her story. The sun shone gently on her face as she held the scissors in her hand, her white nurse's coat glowing like armor. Cameras flashed as she cut the red ribbon. The crowd erupted in cheers, children clapped, and some women ululated with joy. Reporters pushed forward, microphones stretched toward her. One asked loudly, "Amaka, what do you say to those who betrayed you, the ones who tried to take this from you?" The crowd hushed. All eyes turned to her. Amaka took a deep breath, her smile calm but powerful. Her voice rang clear. "They tried to sell my future, but destiny is not for sale." The words hung in the air like fire. The crowd erupted again, this time louder, people shouting, "Yes! Yes!" Some clapped, others wiped tears from their eyes. The cameras captured every second. Within hours, the clip spread online across Nigeria, then across Africa. Millions watched her stand tall in front of her clinic, speaking words that carried the weight of every betrayal, every injustice, every broken dream. Young women called her a hero. Struggling workers said her story gave them hope. Even men nodded, saying, "That girl fought with truth." As the cheers echoed around her, Amaka looked up at the sky and whispered softly, "Thank you, Papa." She knew her grandfather's spirit was smiling. Her pain had become her power, and her story was no longer just hers. It belonged to everyone who believed that destiny cannot be stolen.